And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
All right, we're back. Cover 1, the NFL Draft Podcast. Welcome to a Friday edition of the show. Different than normal. I am Russell Brown, and joining me, as always, CP Christian Page. CP, how we doing?
Doing great. Not too many surprises in the first round, but enough to definitely highlight and talk about.
Yeah, we're going to bounce some questions back and forth on the impact of the first round for last night's first round, and then we'll jump into what we think will happen for round 2. A ton of talented players still on the board. I have 3 of my top 15 still there. Jawan Taylor at 7th overall, Byron Murphy at 9, and I still have Cody Ford at 15 still there. So, and also DK Metcalf at 17. So, quite a few players still available. I don't remember exactly what your board looks like, but you guys can check out CP's player rankings that he dropped yesterday afternoon before the draft. Terrific stuff. I love that you put some strengths and weaknesses in there. Very, very detailed and very, very good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just like to have some kind of reference board of people knowing exactly what kind of player they're getting and just quick to the point. And of course, if anybody wants me to elaborate on those points, definitely hit me up on Twitter @_Christian Page.
Yes, smash that follow button. And, of course, you can find me at Russ NFL Draft. Well, let's get into some points. Let's get into some questions and really discuss and dissect this first round. I don't even want to start with Kyler Murray because we've been on radio spots all over the country, you and I, and we've talked about Kyler Murray 5 million times. I don't even really want to talk about Nick Bosa and Quinnen Williams. I think all 3 teams did what they had to do, but really the draft really started at 4 with the Oakland Raiders. Clelin Ferrell was the pick for the Oakland Raiders. I want to get your take on Clelin Ferrell at 4.
It's definitely rich. It was definitely surprising. And like you said, we knew the first 3 picks, it wasn't exciting because we knew that was going to be the picks with Murray, Bosa, and Williams. But we knew Oakland, with the 3 first-round picks, that they were going to spark something in the draft. And whether that was going with maybe a more obvious pick like Ed Oliver, Josh Allen, maybe the 2 best players available on the board. They still went pass rusher direction, but they went with Clelin Ferrell out of Clemson. He was 26 on my board, still a first-round caliber player. I'm not going to fault them as much as really the national media, the consensus is going to. Sure, he's not a completely polished player. He still has some things to work on. I think he needs to hit the weight room just a little bit. But as a pure pass rusher, I think he has a lot in his tool belt that he can really accentuate their pass rushing in capabilities. I mean, the team had 13 sacks last year. That has to be some of the worst numbers that we've ever seen in the NFL. So I'm not going to fault them too much because they knew that they had to get a pass rusher. Again, Clelin Ferrell is a top 5, top 10 pick for that matter, maybe even top 15 pick, was a little rich for my liking. But I'm not going to fault them as much because I think when you look later on in their draft, I think they fulfilled some needs with Josh Jacobs, the Alabama running back at 24, and then Jonathan Abrams, some safety help downhill, the big hitting safety from Mississippi State at 27. So I think all in all, once you really got the handful of draft picks at the time, it was very surprising. But I'm not going to fault Mike Mayock and John Gruden too much by picking Clelin Ferrell, even though he was 26 on my board.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, too, is, and I don't think people maybe, and I'm not saying just specifically you, but just like people in general, like the consensus, I don't think they realize Mike Mayock, John Gruden, they went after 2 players that have won national championships. They went after high-caliber football players. Josh Jacobs won a national championship. Clemson, they won national championships with Clelin Ferrell. So for me, it's, yes, shocking, but they just played to the strength of their board. And maybe Josh Allen made a little bit more sense, but when you have a player that's 6'4" and 265 pounds with the length of Clelin Ferrell and that blend of power and speed and just the production. I mean, he had 50.5 tackles for loss in his career, 27 sacks. I mean, very productive 4-year player for Clemson. So shocking, yes. I'm not going to get up in arms about it. Josh Jacobs, I think, was one of like the worst kept secrets with the Marshawn Lynch news outside of Devin White going to Tampa. And then Jonathan Abram, I can't fault him for that. I mean, he was one of the top safeties for a lot of people. People loved his aggressiveness. They loved the way, like you mentioned, coming downhill. So they got high caliber football players that fit what they're looking to do. And I can live with it. Shocking, yes, passing on 2 top 5 players like Josh Allen and Ed Oliver, but it is what it is. They went with what they needed to do. We were told they were going to do something surprising. I didn't think it was going to be that. I thought it would have been a trade and get a plethora of picks, and maybe they could have done that and still got Clelin Ferrell, but it is what it is. So that's the pick, and I can dig it. So
from a more broader perspective of the 32 picks last night when you're watching the draft, when your immediate reaction was like, man, that is a great fit for this team, what pick had you going like, hey, this guy's going to star immediately because of the situation he got drafted into?
It's down to, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, I like Jeffrey Simmons to Tennessee at 19 because we've often said he's a top 5 player, and we kind of projected that he would go like pretty much between 20 and like 28, but 19 is perfect. He fits well next to Casey, so I can dig that. But also Jonah Williams at 11. I mean, to get the 5th best player in the draft to play left tackle for you, and that's what they list him as an offensive tackle, to just get the best, pure, technically sound offensive tackle in the draft at 11 is a home run for them. And with that new coaching staff, and yes, you have Andy Dalton, and there's some uncertainty, and I'll tell you what, I had a dream last night, which is crazy. Of course, dreaming of the draft. I had a dream that Ryan Finley was drafted by the Bengals. So don't ask me why. I have no idea. I woke up and I thought it was in reality, and I checked my phone because I was tweeting about it in my dream. But no, like I like that fit. I like Devin Bush to Pittsburgh as well. Ed Oliver to Buffalo. I mean, to sit there and get the 3rd best player in the draft and do nothing for it when they were considered a team to trade up, to be able to do that, I mean, you can't really fault those teams for taking those players. So I really like those 4 players and those 4 specific team fits. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm going to completely mirror what you just said. I think picks 9, 10, and 11, Buffalo, Ed Oliver, Pittsburgh trading up with Denver to select Devin Bush, and then Cincinnati going for a need and best player available. That's like a match made in heaven if you can tackle both of those with one of your first-round selections. Those are 3 of my favorite picks in the entirety of the draft. I mean, Buffalo, we knew that there was some mutual interest between Ed Oliver and that organization. They needed some interior line help. Kyle Williams obviously hanging it up. Ed Oliver can add an instant splash to an already very solid defense. Their pass defense was spectacular. I think their rush defense needed a little bit of help, but I think that definitely solidifies them. It's one of the more underrated defensive units as a whole in the NFL. Devin Bush, Pittsburgh needed some inside linebacker help. I think the only thing that separates these two, Devin White and Devin Bush, is just the length. I think Bush struggles a little bit with stacking just based on his size limitations and his overall frame. The dude is fast, sideline to sideline speed, probably more range than Devin White, and I think he's a little more consistent tackler. And then going like what you said about Jonah Williams, having that best player available on the board, it gives you solidifies that offensive tackle need that you've really been lacking since Andrew Whitworth went to the Los Angeles Rams. So I definitely think Jonah Williams, he might be my favorite pick that we saw last night based on the need and based on that player, and then hoping to see him succeed. Because you talked about him as your 5th best player on the board. He was my 3rd best player on the board. So definitely a lot of value there, Cincinnati picking him at 11.
Yeah, and you could tell when he was walking up to the stage, he just had a chip on his shoulder, just because he's been saying it for a while. He's the best tackle in the draft, and he says he's going to play offensive tackle, and he truly believes that. So I think he's got motivation to prove a lot of teams wrong, and I think teams like Detroit, Buffalo, Jacksonville, and even the Giants at 6, teams that should have considered an offensive tackle, I think they might regret passing on a player like Jonah Williams. So we'll see what happens with that, but I'm curious about Atlanta. I mean, I can't really figure out what it is that they were trying to do in this draft. It's still early. We'll see how the rest of the draft shakes up for them. But for them to get Chris Lindstrom at 14, I felt like was somewhat of a reach because he was my 30th ranked player on the board. I like Chris Lindstrom. I think he's a plug-and-play right guard. And I know there was a mock draft from Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, and they had Lindstrom at 12 to the Packers. So, like, to see this happen isn't that surprising, but it just felt like a little bit of a reach. And especially with all like the news circulating that they were going to move up and take a defensive tackle like Wilkins or Oliver, and they didn't do that. And then you have Caleb McGarry, who they traded back into the draft for, or in the first round for, and I'm okay with him. But we still have Cody Ford, we still have Jawan Taylor. I'm kind of curious about that. I like that they're going in the trenches, but just not the offensive tackle I was thinking, and not really the player I was thinking at 14. So what do you think about the Falcons? Can you get behind this and think it's a good move?
I can get behind the idea of drafting and trading up to grab a second offensive lineman, especially a right tackle. But the two guys that they selected, Chris Lindstrom, like you said, he's not a bad football player. He makes sense as a first-round player. He was 32 on my board. So if that was a need, they reached a little bit, but I definitely can get behind them going there. But I still like Cody Ford better. I still like Dalton Reisner better, which if you're looking for a right guard and a right tackle and trying to, kind of flirt with the idea of kind of that versatility guy, Dalton Reisner's your man. I think Cody Ford could be as well. Both guys having that, right tackle experience, but also having maybe more of the lack of length to play inside at guard. You'd feel more comfortable there. Then Jawan Taylor still left on the board, a true right tackle, the guy out of Florida. And I think it does make sense that they went and tackled the offensive line needs, but I'm not 100% behind the guys that they picked. I mean, like I said, Lindstrom's 32 on my board, and Caleb McGarry's 58 on my board. So I think they definitely reached for both of those guys. I don't think they're going to have much of a problem, but I think when they look at the landscape and where guys like Ford, Reisner, and Taylor fall, then they may have some reservations about, maybe we should have gotten those guys. But yeah, it's definitely interesting that they went with especially McGarry. Again, I can get behind Lindstrom, but especially McGarry trading up to get him one of those last few picks of the first round. It's hard to really 100% back them up with the McGarry pick.
And it's interesting with McGarry because, or like really just with speaking with Dalton Reisner on Monday, he told me like he loved working with the Raiders at the Senior Bowl, but he said out of all the teams that he met with, and he met with all 32, two teams that when he visited there, it just felt like natural fits and he really enjoyed everything and they were very interested in him. He said Atlanta and Washington. So Atlanta not taking him is it's a little odd to me. When you could have had him at 31. And if you moved up to get him, like that's fine because he's a great football player and he's got the great, attitude of a football player and everything. So very interesting, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm assuming that's your right guard, right tackle combination for the future.
All right, the next question. Dexter Lawrence, 17 to New York. One, you can talk about the New York Giants as a whole, whether you think you disliked or liked their draft. Daniel Jones pick, I'm not too surprised by it because we heard the chatter. Dave Gettleman, it was the worst kept secret among really of the NFL, like the past few NFL drafts that we followed. It was almost just bet on them to pick Daniel Jones at 6. But the question, or the biggest question I had with their draft was picking Dexter Lawrence at 7 because, they got rid of Snacks Harrison and then they they draft Alvin Tomlinson, who's pretty solid at that 0 tech or 1 tech spot in that 3-4 alignment. And surely they didn't draft Dexter Lawrence just to be a backup or even move Dalvin Tomlinson to the outside or even Lawrence to the outside in that 3-4 alignment. So the Giants as a whole and then the Dexter Lawrence pick at 17.
Yeah, I don't know. The Lawrence pick was shocking when you have pretty much every defensive tackle on the board still. You had Jeffrey Simmons there. You had Jerry Tillery. And you still have, other guys, in round 2, like Charles Omenu. You have a need for an edge rusher. Montez Sweat was there. And when they, were sitting there, that's who I thought it was going to be. And I was like, okay, I can live with Daniel Jones at 6. And again, I can live with, like I just said, I can live with Daniel Jones at 6. And like you mentioned, we kind of had a feeling like that was going to be the thing. I figured it would be moving from 17 to 8 or 9 or maybe even 7 to make sure that they get him, because there was that rumbling of the Redskins being interested. And then we found out after the pick was made, the Broncos were interested in Daniel Jones as well. And you don't know at Cincinnati how they valued the quarterbacks either. They were one of the most quiet teams throughout the draft process of what they were really going to do. So I can get behind Daniel Jones. What bothers me with the Jones pick isn't about what the Giants did to get him. It's more so about like how the media is making this out to be, is that the media was much lower on Daniel Jones than the NFL, and the NFL is much higher. And like the mainstream media is trying to make it sound like the NFL is always going to be right on this pick. That's not true. Like Daniel Jones was 78th on my board, or 76th on my board for a reason. And it's not because he's not athletic or that he doesn't have like a big arm. It's because he's very inconsistent with his arm. But then I don't like that the mainstream media is saying that Eli Manning's a great mentor and stuff like that. Eli Manning's never been a mentor before. He's never been in this situation. They've never had a backup behind him outside of last year with Davis Webb and Kyle Oletta and stuff. And even then, it didn't even really matter, and it goes to show. So, like, yeah, there's going to be some pressure on Eli, and I'm sure he can be a good teacher, but it's weird. I'm okay with the DeAndre Baker pick. I like the aggressiveness of coming back up into the first round and getting your corner. If that's the guy that you like, that's fine with me, because for much of the year, until I watched Byron Murphy, Baker was my top corner too. So I can understand that, and I can get behind it, because he's a player that I think can do a lot in zone and a lot in man, and he doesn't give up big plays regardless of some of the question marks on the long speed. He's always finding ways to the football. He's aggressive. So while he has kind of a chip on his shoulder, I like the fit. I hope that New York's not like too overwhelming for him, kind of like it was for Eli Apple. So we'll see how that comes about. But again, yeah, the Dexter Lawrence one just doesn't make sense. I understand plugging him in the middle of your defense to kind of become like Snacks Harrison. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. I thought that was a little rich. I liked Dexter Lawrence at the back end of the first round. And had he have not been suspended for the college football playoff, he would have been a player that we talked about all year long in the first round.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I'm not upset necessarily with what New York did. I think, they got their quarterback. If that's Daniel Jones, then so be it. I mean, if that was Blake Bortles for the Jacksonville Jaguars, so be it. I mean, I think every team has that kind of their secret. Like, we want to go up in the top 10 and get our guy. And if you believe wholeheartedly that he's going to be your next superstar quarterback, then by all means, go grab him and just deal with the media perception of it being a bad pick. The Dexter Lawrence one doesn't make sense because it wasn't necessarily a need, in my opinion. I think Dalvin Tomlinson has done a great job in that scheme and filling in for Harrison when he departed to the Detroit Lions. And I like what they did with DeAndre Baker. He wasn't my top corner, but he's a top 5 corner, and if he fits them, I mean, he has that island capability that they've probably been lacking, that they hoped that Eli Apple would have given them at some point in his early years, and he didn't. He went downhill ever since his rookie season. So I think DeAndre Baker can slide into a spot that they needed, and I agree with you. I like the aggressive attitude for them to trade back up into the first round and select a cornerback, which they thought was the best cornerback in this class.
Yeah, now I don't want to cut us off on the first round chatter, and I don't want to jump into round 2 yet. I do have a question for you on some offensive tackles, but I was just checking my phone, and this was just about an hour ago from Pro Football Talk. I missed this. Multiple sources say the Dolphins are close to a deal for quarterback Josh Rosen, and that deal may actually be tentatively done. Arizona would get pick number 48 from Miami. So if that's the truth, that's phenomenal for Josh Rosen. That's phenomenal for the Dolphins. Before we go any further, what do you think of that if that happens?
It's incredible that Josh Rosen's only worth the second-round pick. And I know, sure, he played one season. He wasn't special. But it's almost an anomaly if you have really a special rookie quarterback. Every rookie quarterback has their bumps and bruises. Now, it doesn't help that we've had guys like Deshaun Watson, Andrew Luck, Cam Newton, and even Baker Mayfield come in the league pretty much like the woods on fire, even though they did have some struggles. But everybody, it seems like almost not every organization, but a lot of organizations expect you to at least threaten some kind of playoff picture or really threaten some kind of statistical production among the top 15 quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, Arizona was not happy with that, or there just wasn't a marriage between Josh Rosen and the Arizona Cardinals. Miami, good for them. They passed up Dwayne Haskins at 13 to select Christian Wilkins, probably the best player available situation. By all means, do that. And now they may be knowing that they had a negotiation in place to take Josh Rosen. So kudos for Miami, and I guess kudos to Arizona because they got the trade done on Friday, just the day after the draft and after they selected Kyler Murray. So I guess it's kind of a win-win for both teams, but it's still, not going down the rabbit hole of whether or not Kyler Murray should be the pick. But it's just strange how all this is unfolded, but not surprising to say the least.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's on Arizona. That it's their own fault that it's a second-round pick because they didn't want to leak the pick out that they were taking Kyler Murray and everything else. All they had to do was say, hey, we're taking Kyler Murray, or just simply pick up the phone. And it's because it sounded like, and there's mixed reports on everything, so who really knows? But it did sound like they didn't pick up the phone at all for making a trade on Josh Rosen until about a few hours before the draft last night. So if you haven't been doing any calling around for the last week, that's on you. And I mean, that's on them. So it is what it is. That would give Miami Christian Wilkins in round 1, which I like. Miami then would get Josh Rosen in round 2, and then they have picks 78, 116, 151, 233, and 234. That's all in rounds 3 through 7, except they don't have a 6th-round pick. So they still have some picks that they can do some damage with. And if I'm looking at my board, at 78, they could very well look at Lonnie Johnson, corner out of Kentucky. He's at 77th on my board. But speaking of a player on my board that's sitting right there, and I know I was going to ask you about offensive tackles, I'm going to ask you about somebody we saw at the Senior Bowl. He was 78th on my board, LJ Collier, edge rusher out of TCU. Love the length for him. I love the ability for him to use that long arm technique. But he goes in the first round at pick 29. Seattle surprises everybody. They by the way, they did a masterful job in this draft. They went from 5 picks to 9 picks, and at one point were picking back-to-back at 29 and 30. Ended up with only pick 29, but they'll pick again tonight at 37. So it'll be interesting. But what do you think of LJ Collier?
You're more in tune with LJ Collier. Kind of you actually introduced me to him because I remember it was probably right around the Senior Bowl time, and I'll be honest, I remember I texted you, it's like, what are you up to? Who you watching? You're like, LJ Collier, and I'm like, Russ, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know who that is. And then so you introduced me to him, and now I don't think either of us expected him to be a first round pick, but I think it does kind of go a little unnoticed that of what Seattle was able to obtain, coming in with 5 and then gaining that ninth pick. So I think that's kind of swept under the rug. But Seattle, they're going to surprise us. Last year, Rashad Penny, nobody thought that was coming, and now LJ Collier. They needed to address the pass rushing, and obviously Frank Clark, now a Kansas City Chief, they needed somebody that could produce at a high level. And if LJ Collier's that guy, and even though some other teams in the league don't think so, then so be it. Seattle has shown that they can draft later round guys and produce them into I'll say all pro players, but consistent players that aren't liabilities. So I definitely think if the right coaching staff is in play to make and develop LJ Collier into a consistent 4-3 defensive end, by all means, I have all the hope in the world. Sure, it's a reach. I mean, he was in the 70s on my draft board, but again, it's hard to really say, oh, that's a horrible pick until we really know what we know. I'm fumbling my words. Know what unfolds later on, and based on the production, because Frank Clark was kind of a crazy pick based on the background issues and some production at Michigan, but coming in the second round and he produced, now he's getting paid. And so I think if LJ Collier is again under the right coaching with Pete Carroll and that crew, I think it could turn into a very solid pick for Seattle.
Yeah, it could. I mean, and again, like, I'm not saying like it's a bad pick by any means. It was certainly a shocking pick, just like Cleveland Farrell and Caleb McGarry and stuff like that. So it is shocking. I thought Charles Omenu would have been a natural fit for them, and they very well could look at him at 37 too. I think Greedy Williams is a player that we'll talk about here momentarily for round 2. But I'll talk about a player, and I'll ask you about a player that you introduced me to, and that's Titus Howard, who went at pick 23 to Houston, and then the pick before that, Philadelphia went Andre Dillard. So What were your thoughts on those two picks going back to back? Because I love the Eagles pick of Andre Dillard, but Titus Howard in round one, little shocking.
Yeah, definitely. And it may be a little shocking that Andre Dillard went as late as he did, because I mean he was 19 on my board, but I just definitely think with all the talk of him possibly being the top tackle drafted even over Jonah Williams, it was a little surprising to see him slip down to Philadelphia. But I think he definitely fulfills a need and probably a best player available situation. So going with Jonah Williams and the Cincinnati Bengals at 11, BPA and fulfilling a need. I think Philadelphia also addressed that. I think Dillard, obviously one of the cleaner pass protectors here. There's going to be a lot of questions about, can he consistently run block? Because obviously we didn't see that much the scheme he played with at Washington State. But I definitely like the pick for Philadelphia there, fulfilling that need. I would like Dalton Reisner a little bit more, but I definitely understand Andre Dillard's situation in Philadelphia. I go on to Titus Howard. I like the guy a lot. He was number 50 on my big board. Definitely rich for a team that was ranked dead last in sacks given up on the negative side. 62 sacks given up. I'm not saying Titus Howard can't fulfill that bookend tackle responsibility that they need, but you're looking at a guy, Julian Davenport from Bucknell and Titus Howard from Alabama State, as potentially your bookend tackles. Now, I'm not going to say here I'm biased against small school guys, because there's been a lot of instances that could prove me wrong there. But if that's the direction Houston's going to go in, there's a lot of pressure on Titus Howard here. Look, he has athletic feet. He's new to the position, which is a little questionable going in the first round, but I definitely think the leadership qualities and the effort that he brings, heavy hands, athletic feet, I think his kick slide definitely supplements with some of his incapabilities. But it's definitely rich at pick 23, especially with Jawan Taylor left on the board. I don't know what's going on with this situation. Greg Gabriel, former scouting director, I know he has his hot takes and questionable tweets, but he said he's talked to some guys in the league, said Jawan Taylor may have some knee issues that scared some teams off from him. But still, it definitely is interesting, even with some knee injuries, that they decided to keep Taylor on the board and draft Titus Howard, which isn't necessarily a one-hit wonder, but for as far as notoriety, he definitely is. But he checked a lot of boxes at the combine, his tape, really good film versus Auburn, got better every single day at the Senior Bowl. So I can justify Titus Howard being picked in probably round 2, but round 1 at pick 23 with some tackles left on the board. It's definitely rich and definitely questionable.
Yeah, it really is. I thought, we had this conversation last week. We talked about Titus Howard, or maybe earlier this week, Titus Howard or Greg Little, who's getting drafted first. And we all said Titus Howard, but I mean, I really wasn't expecting this. So we'll see what happens, but I'm glad you brought up offensive tackles, especially one that fell into the second round. I'd like to take some time, talk about the second round and day 2 tonight, where we'll see the second and third round develop into what should be another historic night. We've got players like Byron Murphy out of Washington, both our top cornerback, still on the board. DK Metcalf is still there. And then you said Jawan Taylor is still on the board, as well as Cody Ford out of Oklahoma. So there's quite a few players available. How's this thing going to be starting off? Are we going to see Arizona going after an offensive tackle? Could they go after Byron Murphy? I mean, they went there a few years back with Budda Baker, and they've shown the tendency to go to smaller corners over the years. So maybe Byron Murphy's a fit there, but also is DK Metcalf something? So let's start with the offensive tackles. How long is Jawan Taylor going to wait? How long is Cody Ford going to wait?
Yeah, that's tough because you're looking at situations here. I know there's some teams out that could use an offensive tackle. Make a lot of sense. And I've always said this till I'm blue in the face, that once you draft your franchise quarterback, as quickly as you can, build around him. Now, Arizona, they got Christian Kirk a year ago. Decent rookie season. David Johnson, if he's used correctly and he's healthy with a healthy offensive line in front of him, one of the better backs in the league. You got your quarterback. Larry Fitzgerald on his last year, so you could look at the receiver position. But you need to solidify that offensive line. So if they want to go with a guy with some versatility like Dalton Reisner or Cody Ford, I get it. They want to shore up one of the tackle positions, especially right tackle, go with Jawan Taylor here. But I could also see them, going to that defensive secondary and looking at Byron Murphy, a guy that's number 10 on my board. So definitely a lot of value there. They want an elite level athlete. I know his long speed's questionable just a little bit, and some of maybe just raw ability, but I think Byron Murphy, best cornerback in this draft, or even if they wanted to go Greedy Williams. his long speed isn't in question. Ran somewhere in the 4.3s, I believe, in the combine. But his just lower body stiffness, maybe some lackadaisical effort, is definitely questionable. But I think Byron Murphy, one of the offensive linemen here, make a lot of sense at pick 33. So I know I kind of answered the question all in all in Arizona's pick, but I think they could go in a lot of different directions. And I don't think if they go corner or if they go offensive line, I think you can justify that pick because I think both positions are an area of need here for Arizona.
Yeah, I really like Cody Ford for them at 33. I think that's just the way to go. If there's anybody that knows outside of Marquise Brown and Drew Samia and Ben Powers and Bobby Evans, outside of some of the other Oklahoma players, of course, but there's a player that's very much in play here. You can get, some would consider a top 5 talent in Kyler Murray. You got him at 1. You got a player that's very dynamic that you're going to build around. And I truly believe that's what they should do. Just like you've said, I think Cody Ford should be the guy because if there's anybody that knows the way Kyler Murray's going to play in and outside of the pocket, it's Cody Ford. And you have a need for right tackle because Marcus Gilbert is there, but that doesn't necessarily mean Marcus Gilbert's going to be there. And I put that in air quotations because he's coming off of a knee injury. So there's a reason why he was not with the Pittsburgh Steelers anymore. There's a reason to why Cody Ford fell. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's people were not impressed with his combine. They were not impressed with how, where he is as an athlete and overall strength. But on tape, the footwork is there. The grip strength is there. And I think the ability to climb and get to the second level is there too. So Arizona with Cody Ford at 33, I think is a match made in heaven. It sounds weird to go back-to-back with Oklahoma players, but it's not every day that I think you get a top 15 player at 33. But really, Jawan Taylor is an interesting one. I can't see him slipping past 38 to Jacksonville. And that seems similar to like Cam Robinson 2 years ago where he fell to the second round. And I believe it was like right around 37, 38, something like that for Cam Robinson. Jawan Taylor is a fit, I think, for a right tackle spot there. But it's interesting. Yannick Kajust, he fell down boards because of a lower body injury with his knee. Now we've got Jawan Taylor falling down draft board. So it makes me wonder, is Kajust even going to go tonight? Is he going to get drafted at all, like in the third round?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, he's been one of those players that had some late first-round buzz. Then you had guys sneak up in there like a Titus Howard that snuck up there due to, participating in that Senior Bowl, which Yannick Kajust had to pull out. So it is interesting. He's been very quiet, and he has some pretty good tape. I know there's some flexibility issues there, but with some lower body injuries, it's definitely not a guy you want to really invest in early in that second round. But just to mirror what you said, if Jawan Taylor does slip past 38 to Jacksonville, if he gets by Buffalo at 40, I think we really have to start asking questions about, okay, what's the real story on this guy? Because Jawan Taylor was a guy that if Ed Oliver was not there for Buffalo at 9, that was a guy that they were talking about drafting for a long time, even over a guy like Jonah Williams. So having the opportunity to draft him at 40 in the second round, that could also be, that could be a great situation for Buffalo and Brandon Beane there. But, it will be interesting. If he somehow gets by Jacksonville and Buffalo, I think we really got to start asking questions like, okay, what's the real story? Because it may be his knee issue. Sometimes, you have those cartilage issues that a lot of people are really scared of because they know their longevity is just very, short in the matter of time and everything. But there may be some more background information that becomes uncovered. I don't really know. But, again, if Jawan Taylor or maybe even Dalton Reisner slips past picks 40 or, maybe going a little bit deeper, we'll just say 50. We'll put 50 at the benchmark spot. Then I think we really have to start scratching our heads and being like, okay, what's the real issue?
I agree. I think 40 is probably the sweet spot for Jawan Taylor. I like Dalton Reisner to San Francisco at 36. That versatility, I think, is something that Kyle Shanahan will covet. I think the experience is something that he will covet. I know some people have said, what about DK Metcalf for San Francisco? They met after the combine, and from everything I read, DK Metcalf in San Francisco did not see eye to eye. Apparently, they did not like his attitude and things like that. So maybe that's something that hurt his overall stock because, I thought he was a borderline first-round grade, and I thought he was a first-round player, though, still. And he's sitting here. If he makes it to 40, and if you're Buffalo and Jawan Taylor and DK Metcalf are on the board at 40, what the hell do you do?
Yeah, I was thinking I was going to ask you the same thing about Jacksonville, kind of, because they could probably use another guy out there too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not a bad decision, but I think Buffalo's made enough moves this offseason to not necessarily have an alpha dog at wide receiver, but there's enough bodies to go around to help with Josh Allen. This receiving class, it's pretty deep as far as if you just want a guy, if you want another Zay Jones, I think you can definitely find him. But, I mean, if you want that alpha dog guy, DK Metcalf could be your guy, A.J. Brown could be your guy, or even Hakeem Butler could be your guy. So it's not to say that DK Metcalf, he may not even be the next receiver off the board. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Buffalo does going the wide receiver offensive line route. But I think they definitely need to tackle the offensive line because I think their wide receiver depth is okay enough to bypass to round 3 and 4.
It could be, but teams with multiple picks is a big storyline for tonight. And then I don't really have much else after this other than maybe a conversation about Drew Lock. Because Denver's got 2 second-round picks at 52 and 41. So you would have to think if he makes it to 52, he's going to be the pick. But we can get into that in a moment. But teams with multiple picks in the second round, and really a team that I really want to talk about is Indianapolis. But in the second round, Denver's got multiple second-round picks at 52 and 41, like I mentioned. Philadelphia, 53 and 57. Houston's got back-to-back 54 and 55. The Patriots, 56 and 64. Kansas City is sitting there with 63 and 61. So I think it could be very interesting right there from 53 to 64. We could see tons of talent coming off the board because of teams like Houston passing on good talent. And I'm not saying Titus Howard's bad, but passing on stuff in the first round to take a player like Titus Howard. The same thing with Caleb McGarry with Atlanta. So, talent is getting pushed down boards. It's going to be interesting. And I think these teams that continue to win every single year and are competing every year, this is why they put themselves in position in this second round to have multiple picks and they stock up on it. But Indianapolis is a team that is so interesting tonight. They've got 4 picks in the second and third round combined, and they've got 3 second-round picks, pick 34, 46, and 59, and then they pick 89th in the third round. What are we thinking they do? I mean, they've got 4 picks. I mean, they could essentially get 4 starters in this draft.
Yeah, they definitely could. And I think if you're looking at their first round or their first pick of the night, I think they need some safety help. I think Nasir Adderley could be an opportunity here. I mean, he might have a lot of first-round grades across the board. I think he's a guy that the media likes a lot more than the actual league offices do, which we always see that because, there might be some players, but then it can also go the other way. The media likes a player a lot more than some NFL offices, and the media can be right. But so I think it's just kind of a give and take type situation. So I think you could look at Nasir Adderley there at 34. I don't know how they feel about Ja'Kai Polite, but I mean, slipping down to picks 46, I think could be an opportunity there, or pick 59 potentially. I don't know where Ja'Kai Polite's going to go, but he has first round talent. Just the immaturities that have a lot of teams questioning whether they really want to invest. But when you have as many picks as Indianapolis does tonight, I think you can take that quote unquote risk on a guy like Ja'Kai Polite. And I wouldn't be surprised if they take another wide receiver. If they take a wide receiver, and they will have their choice. So they could definitely start. They really like DK Metcalf or Hakeem Butler, whoever it may be, at 34. They could start that run of wide receivers because you could see Oakland getting one. You could see San Francisco going that direction. Like I said, Jacksonville could go that way. Tampa Bay lost Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries. Look for another wide receiver there. Talked about Buffalo. Denver, Demaryius Thomas no longer on the team, of course, after last year being shipped off to Houston. So I definitely think that the wide receiver run could start at 34, and if not at 34, I mean, really, it's going to start at some time tonight, and we know there could be 10 total in the entirety, including the first round, 10 total wide receivers drafted by the conclusion of the third round tonight.
Yeah, there really could be. I mean, like you mentioned, Hakeem Butler, a player that I think is probably going to slip under the radar, Kelvin Harmon out of NC State, because of a combine that wasn't as good as others. You got Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, again, DK Metcalf, Paris Campbell will probably be in the mix simply because of his combine. You've got JJ Arcega-Whiteside. no, Marquise Brown was already taken, but he was 49th on my board. I'm looking at my sheet right now.
A.J. Brown, I don't know if you said him.
Yeah, A.J. Brown, Miles Boykin, Emmanuel Hall. I mean, there's a ton of wide receivers, and we could see 3 or 4 running backs taken as well. I mean, we could see Devin Singletary off the board tonight. Darrell Henderson makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, for Houston at 54 or 55. Lamar Miller's pretty much, I would think, done with Houston after this year's contract's up. No reason to re-sign him or bring him back. You bring in a player like Henderson, his explosiveness, that one-cut ability and the vision through the hole is always very good. But with Indianapolis, I like that you brought up safety. I like bringing up Ja'Kai Polite, another player. Again, I continue to circle back to him. Charles Omenu, there's mutual interest there. They've got 3 opportunities to take the kid. I would hope that they take him. I like the thought of maybe even looking at a player like Draymond Jones could be very well into the mix. So, there's a ton of players tonight. And even with the corners, you've got – we could see a run on receivers, a run on cornerbacks like Justin Lane, Amani O, Julian Love, Greedy Williams, Byron Murphy. We could see so many players taken within the first 15 picks of this second round tonight, where all these guys could have gone in the first round. It really could go like that. And that's how hard this draft was to predict. But one player that some thought was a first rounder, others did not, Drew Lock. Denver has 2 second-round picks. We've heard about it since the Senior Bowl. If Miami gets Josh Rosen, I feel like there's only one team left to get Drew Lock, and it's got to be Denver, right?
Just based on the reports that we heard now, it was many months ago, and that John Elway attended quite a few, Missouri games, had some meetings, and it seemed like there was an unwritten guarantee that Drew Lock was going to be the pick at 10. Now, obviously, a lot can change, and then Denver even trades out of that pick. So it's not necessarily that they were lying. They just weren't totally telling the truth if that was the case. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Drew Lock, he could probably afford to sit a year or so under a guy that is at the end of his career in Joe Flacco. And I don't know the commitment to the Broncos and Flacco at this moment. But if not Denver, I think Cincinnati, the longevity of Andy Dalton could be in question. Green Bay, the longevity of Aaron Rodgers. He's not going anywhere right now, but definitely with a new coaching staff and Aaron Rodgers, now you're seeing more of a theme of just like little nagging injuries, not major injuries, but some nagging injuries. I think that would be something that they need to look at. And I would have said Miami would be an opportunity there, but obviously with Josh Rosen most likely going to be a Miami Dolphin in 2019, they've already tackled that quarterback need. So I think Drew Lock, I feel pretty confident saying he's going to be a round 2 pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Finley's the next quarterback off the board.
I'm for it. I love Ryan Finley. So we all know that. So we'll see. I don't know, man. It's this second day of the draft is really the meat and potatoes of the draft.
It's my favorite day.
And plus you don't just get 1 round, you get 2 rounds of the draft. Tomorrow is going to be a lot of fun too, obviously, because you get rounds 4 through 7, but tonight is a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. There's so many picks for so many different teams. Again, like we mentioned, teams with multiple picks in the second round and in the third round. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Do you have any final thoughts, anything that you're working on for today or tomorrow for the people?
Yeah, we'll look more at scheme fits, and I think just kind of evaluate the days 1 and days 2, and just see who, had some head-scratching picks, which we already addressed some of the Oakland Raiders and New York Giants, but who also had some home run picks and even some of the unsexy picks like a Chris Lindstrom or a Garrett Bradbury or some other teams like that need to get higher praise for it, I guess, just based on tackling a need. But just a message to the masses. Make sure that you remember that the draft starts an hour earlier tonight. It's not the same time as last night. It's starting 1 hour earlier, so 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight as opposed to 8 p.m. Eastern last night.
Yes, 7 p.m. tonight. Probably will still go to 11 or 12 o'clock. So buckle in, get your drinks ready, get some pizza, and get ready for the second and third rounds tonight. Well, CP, thanks for joining me on a day where you have to go into the radio station and do some stuff. Have fun with that. Be sure to check them out, guys. What is that, ESPN 106.7?
No, it's actually sportscallauburn.com. So we're going to be talking a lot of drafts, and it's under Tiger Communications. And we're going to be talking a lot of draft today. So not just Auburn guys. It can be anything ranging from SEC guys or the best and worst picks. So, yeah, follow me at _Christian Page and that account to the radio station at SportsCallAU.
Yes, guys. Check him out, of course, on Twitter. Smash the follow button. You'll hear it every time on the show. Also, find us on Spreaker.com. That's Spreaker with an R. It's like speaker. Just simply search Cover One Sports. Become a fan of our page. Also, go to iTunes or Spotify and download us to your podcast app, and also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. So every single time we drop an episode, which we will probably do a couple of times just this weekend, you can stay up to date with everything. But you can find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. But enjoy the draft tonight. We will talk to you guys maybe tomorrow or Sunday to conclude everything for 2019. So until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.